Emily's life, by all outward appearances, was the kind women dreamed about. At 30, she glowed with the calm confidence of someone who had worked hard for her happiness and finally held it in her hands. 7 months pregnant, she wore her bump like a badge of honor, moving through her sunlit home with the grace of someone deeply content. Her days were filled with baby books, gentle walks, prenatal yoga, and preparing a cozy nursery painted in soft pastels. Everything, from the hand-sewn curtains to the wooden cradle passed down from her grandmother, whispered of love, stability, and dreams coming true. Her husband Nathan was part of that dream, tall, sharply dressed, and charming in a quiet, dependable way. A senior executive at a booming marketing firm, he was always busy, always moving. But even when deadlines pulled him away, he made it home for dinner more often than not, and never missed a doctor's appointment. He had been thrilled at the idea of fatherhood, doting on Emily throughout her pregnancy. When she had morning sickness, he was the one holding her hair back. When she craved weird snacks in the middle of the night, he'd drive to get them with a smile. Every morning, Emily prepared a homemade lunch for Nathan. Sometimes it was just a simple sandwich with a side of fruit. Other days she got creative with pastas or baked treats. Along with the food, she tucked a small handwritten note into his briefcase, a habit she'd started in their dating days and never let go of. "You've got this," one would read. "Counting down the days till we're 3, read another. It made her happy to think of him finding the note during his hectic day, reminded of the world waiting for him at home. She often visited him at the office too. The receptionist, a bubbly 20-something named Chelsea, always smiled when Emily arrived with her signature lunch bag and baby glow. Emily would chat with the staff, drop off Nathan's food, maybe steal a quick kiss if he wasn't in a meeting. The team adored her. "You've got yourself a gem," they'd say. Nathan would just smile and nod, never correcting them. And why would he? Emily believed they had the kind of love that made people jealous. But lately, just barely, something had started to shift. Small things, tiny signals that brushed past her like whispers in the dark. Nathan's phone, once left on kitchen counters and nightstands, now stayed locked and face down. He laughed less, checked the time more. He still kissed her goodbye each morning, but the warmth in his eyes flickered too quickly. Emily told herself it was work stress, pressure from his upcoming presentation, or maybe just fatherhood nerves. She'd rub her belly and whisper to the baby, "Your daddy's just tired. He loves us." But some nights, as she lay in bed listening to the soft buzz of messages he wouldn't check until morning, a quiet, persistent ache started to bloom in her chest. One she tried very hard to ignore. It was a crisp Saturday morning when Jenna dropped the first stone into Emily's calm waters. The two were seated at their favorite corner table in a little cafe just blocks from Emily's house, sipping decaf lattes and sharing a buttery croissant. Jenna, ever the bold one, leaned in across the table with a hesitant edge to her voice that immediately made Emily tense. I wasn't sure if I should say anything," Jenna began, fiddling with the corner of her napkin, "but I saw Nathan the other day. Outside his office." Emily smiled, relaxing. "That's not surprising. That's where he works." "No, I mean, he wasn't alone," Jenna said carefully. "He was with a woman. A young one. Blonde. Pretty. They looked familiar." There was a pause. Emily blinked, then gave a short laugh. "He works with a whole team of people, Jen. You know how it is, he mentors interns, junior staff." Jenna nodded slowly, clearly gauging how far she should push. "Yeah, I know. Maybe it's nothing. They looked close. Like more than co-workers. I thought you'd want to know." Emily forced another laugh, brushing it off. "You've watched too many Netflix thrillers." Still, when she got home and lay on the couch, her mind kept replaying Jenna's words. She knew Nathan mentored a lot of new hires. He'd even mentioned someone named Sophie recently. "Bright girl," he'd said. "Eager to learn." That had sounded innocent then. But now, even the memory of it made her skin prickle. She didn't want to be that wife. Suspicious. Paranoid. She had a child to think about. Stress wasn't good for the baby. But once the seed was planted, doubt grew like ivy, creeping into everything. Over the next week, she noticed things she'd once dismissed. Nathan began working late, almost every evening. He used to text her when meetings ran long or when he'd be late for dinner, but now, the silence stretched until he walked in close to midnight, smelling faintly of cologne and something harder to place, maybe guilt. His phone, once an afterthought, was now practically glued to his hand. If she reached for it, playfully, even, he'd take it back with a quick, nervous laugh. Work stuff. Confidential. He said it so often, it started to sound like a script. More than that, he was forgetting. Small things but meaningful ones. Like the name they had picked out for the baby girl, Grace. She mentioned it once and he blinked at her, confused, like he'd never heard it before. He missed her prenatal yoga appointment, the one he had promised to drive her to. He didn't remember they had scheduled a maternity photo shoot for the weekend. Emily kept forgiving, making excuses. He's under pressure, she'd tell herself. The baby's coming. He's just overwhelmed. But the lies couldn't stay hidden forever. One Thursday evening, Nathan kissed her on the cheek and said he had a business dinner, client meeting, at the Hilton downtown. Emily, tired and slightly swollen from the long day, waved him off and settled on the couch with her pregnancy pillow and a bowl of ice cream. Just as a romantic comedy started playing, her phone buzzed. A message from Jenna. You're not gonna believe this. I just saw Nathan going into the Regal Hotel. He wasn't alone. Emily's chest went still. Her spoon hovered in midair. She stared at the message, rereading it until the words blurred. Regal Hotel. Not Hilton. Not even close. She called Jenna instantly. What do you mean? Are you sure it was him? Emily's voice trembled. I'm positive, Jenna whispered. He was with the same girl. Blonde. Long legs. They walked in together. He didn't see me. Emily's blood turned cold. She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she stared at the door, waiting for her husband to come home and tell her another story, another carefully polished lie. The baby moved inside her, a soft flutter against her ribs, as if sensing the change in the air. Emily placed a protective hand on her belly and whispered, "We'll be okay." But her voice cracked at the end, and for the first time, she wasn't sure she believed it. The next morning, Emily woke up to a tight knot in her chest that refused to ease. Nathan had come home late again the night before, claiming his client dinner had dragged on. He smelled like whiskey and some perfume she didn't recognize, and when she'd asked how it went, he gave her vague, clipped answers before disappearing into the shower. She hadn't pushed. She was tired, physically and emotionally. But something inside her had shifted. It wasn't just a question of suspicion anymore. It was the aching need to know. So she baked. Baking had always calmed her. As the sun poured in through the kitchen window, Emily stood over the counter, gently scooping vanilla batter into paper-lined cups. The aroma of sweet sugar and warm cinnamon filled the air. She topped each cupcake with a swirl of homemade cream cheese frosting and soft pink sprinkles, Nathan's favorite. She packed them neatly in a white box, tied with a ribbon, and wrote a little note on a pink card, "Just a reminder that we love you." Beneath it, she drew a tiny heart and a sketch of a baby with a bow. She placed the card on top of the box and held it to her chest for a long moment. Then she grabbed her keys, slipped on a cozy maternity cardigan, and headed for his office. The building was sleek and modern, with glass doors and a polished marble lobby. Emily walked in with the ease of someone who belonged. The receptionist, Chelsea, looked up from her desk and forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, Mrs. Porter. Hi," she said, awkwardly standing. "Hi, Chelsea," Emily replied, trying to keep her tone light. "I thought I'd drop these off for Nathan. Are you okay?" Chelsea opened her mouth, then hesitated. "Yeah, of course. He's, in his office." Emily tilted her head. "Is he in a meeting?" No. He's available," Chelsea said quickly, fumbling with a few papers and refusing to meet Emily's eyes. Something tightened in Emily's chest. She gave Chelsea a gentle smile and walked past the desk, heels clicking against the floor. As she reached the hallway, she slowed. Nathan's office door was slightly ajar, and from within, she heard laughter. A woman's laughter. Young. Flirty. Emily's pulse quickened. Then she heard his voice, low, familiar, teasing in a way she hadn't heard in months. She took a breath, pushed the door open, and froze. Nathan was seated behind his desk, leaning slightly forward. Across from him, perched on the edge of the desk in a way that made Emily's stomach twist, was a beautiful young woman with sleek blonde hair, long legs, and a fitted skirt hiked just a little too high. Her name tag glinted under the lights. Sophie. Sophie's hand was resting on Nathan's forearm. His head was tilted up toward her, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. There was an intimacy in the air, effortless, unhidden. Both froze as the door creaked open. Nathan's eyes snapped to Emily's face, and he stood up so fast he knocked over his coffee. Sophie gasped and jumped off the desk, her face turning beet red. "Emily," Nathan said, his voice high and shaky. What are you doing here?" Emily held the cupcake box in her hands like a fragile treasure. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She looked from Nathan to Sophie, then back again. Sophie stepped backward. I didn't know she'd." Nathan shot her a look. "Just go, Sophie." Sophie grabbed her purse and fled the room, brushing past Emily without meeting her eyes. Silence settled like a thick fog. Nathan ran a hand through his hair. "This isn't what it looks like." Emily said nothing. Her hands were trembling slightly, and she clutched the cupcake box tighter to keep them from shaking too much. "She was just asking for help with a campaign pitch," he said, voice low. "It's not. There's nothing going on." Emily slowly placed the box on a nearby table. She stared at it for a moment, then looked up at him. "You were smiling," she whispered. "Laughing." Nathan took a step forward. "Emily, please." She shook her head. The warmth had drained from her face, replaced by a cold clarity. "I believed you," she said softly. "I told everyone you were just tired, stressed, working too hard." Nathan's expression faltered. "You don't understand." "No, Nathan," she said, her voice firm now, steady despite the tears brimming in her eyes. "I understand more than you think." She turned and walked out without another word. The cupcakes remained untouched on the table, the note still tucked inside the ribbon, unread. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Emily felt her heart break quietly inside her chest. But even in that pain, there was something stronger forming beneath it, resolve. The truth was no longer hiding. It had just opened the door and looked her in the eye. The house felt colder that night. Not in temperature but in spirit. The silence between Emily and Nathan had weight, pressing down on every surface like a thick fog. She sat at the kitchen table, a cup of untouched chamomile tea in her hands, staring at the steam as it curled upward and vanished. Nathan stood in the doorway, his face pale, his jaw clenched. He looked like a man on the edge, but Emily wasn't ready to catch him. "I swear to you, Emily," he said quietly, breaking the silence. "There's nothing going on with Sophie. She's just a friend. A colleague." Emily let out a slow breath, then looked up at him, her eyes dull with exhaustion. "Friends don't sit on desks like that. Friends don't giggle like schoolgirls with their hand on your arm. Don't insult me." Nathan stepped into the room, running a hand through his hair. "I know how it looked, but it wasn't what you think. She's young, yes, and maybe she has a crush or whatever, but I haven't done anything. I wouldn't. You're my wife, Em." She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "That's the problem, Nathan. You're acting like that title means something. But lately, all it's meant is late nights, ignored messages, and lies." "I haven't lied." She cut him off sharply. "You told me you had a business dinner at the Hilton. Jenna saw you entering the Regal with her." His face twisted. "That wasn't what it looked like. I had to walk her in for a meeting." Do you hear yourself? Emily's voice cracked with emotion. Everything I ask has a quick excuse, a half-truth. I'm 7 months pregnant, Nathan. I need stability. I need honesty. Not riddles. He stepped forward, guilt etched into every line of his face. I'm just under a lot of pressure at work. I didn't want to burden you. Then you should have leaned on me, she snapped. Isn't that what a marriage is? They stood in tense silence for a long moment. The weight of everything unsaid hovered in the air. Nathan lowered his gaze, and his shoulders sagged under the guilt he could no longer deny. I didn't sleep with her, he whispered, almost to himself. I swear to God. But I liked the attention. I liked feeling important. I felt lost. And she made me feel needed again. The confession hung between them like a wound freshly opened. Emily clutched her belly instinctively, as if shielding her baby from the mess unraveling before her. Her voice was quiet now, not out of calm, but defeat. You had that here. With me. With us. Nathan looked up, eyes filled with regret. I know. I'm sorry, Emily. I never meant to hurt you. She nodded slowly, eyes brimming with tears. But you did. He didn't respond. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said. That night, Nathan took a pillow and a blanket from the linen closet and retreated to the guest room. The sound of the door shutting behind him was softer than a slam, but it felt louder than any scream. Emily lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her hand resting gently on her belly. The baby kicked, as if reminding her she wasn't alone. Still, she had never felt so empty. 3 days passed with barely a word exchanged between Emily and Nathan. The air in the house was heavy, each passing hour wrapped in silence. Nathan moved quietly between rooms, trying not to disturb her, while Emily floated through the days in a fog of disbelief. Every time she looked in the mirror and saw her pregnant belly, the ache in her chest grew deeper. She had built her life around trust, and now even that foundation was crumbling beneath her. It was during one of those long, restless afternoons, curtains drawn, tea gone cold, that Emily's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her check. Emily, I'm sorry to do this, but you need to know the truth. I'm pregnant too. And it's Nathan's. Sophie. Her breath caught. For a full minute, she just stared at the message, the words blurring and sharpening again as her pulse roared in her ears. She reread it, then again. Her fingers trembled as she slowly lowered the phone into her lap. She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw the phone across the room. But instead, she just sat there, frozen in place, feeling the sick twist of betrayal coil even tighter around her. Another message came seconds later. I can prove it. I'm not making this up. Please look. Attached were 2 photos, ultrasound scans. Sophie was early in her pregnancy, maybe 8 or 9 weeks. The images were clear, time-stamped from just a few weeks ago. The math hit Emily like a punch to the gut. The timeline fit. Almost too perfectly. Her heart pounded as she opened the 3rd message. He told me he wasn't serious with you. He said the marriage was just for show. That he was planning to leave. I didn't know you were pregnant until I saw you at the office. That's when I realized he lied to both of us. Emily's entire body went cold. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. The betrayal had new depth now. It wasn't just physical or emotional. It was deceit at its core. The man she loved, the father of her child, had carried on something so deep, so reckless, that now another life might be part of the fallout. She stared at her own belly, feeling her baby stir, as if sensing her pain. The innocence of her unborn child stood in sharp contrast to the chaos unraveling around them. With shaking hands, she typed back. If this is true, we need to be sure. I want a DNA test. Sophie replied within seconds. Yes. I want that too. I don't want lies anymore. Later that evening, Emily confronted Nathan. She didn't scream. She didn't sob. Her voice was quiet, flat, terrifying in its control. "Sophie contacted me," she said, standing at the bedroom door while he folded laundry that didn't matter. "She says she's pregnant. With your child." Nathan froze mid-fold, his eyes darting up, face pale. "She sent ultrasound photos," she continued. "The timing lines up." He opened his mouth, then shut it. The guilt was etched into every line of his face. "I didn't know," he whispered. "She didn't tell me. God, Emily, I made a mistake. I never wanted this to happen." Tears burned behind her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "We're getting a DNA test. I won't bring this baby into a world full of lies." Nathan nodded slowly, defeated. "Okay." That was all she needed. Not promises. Not excuses. Just the truth, however ugly it was. The days that followed moved slowly, dragging Emily through each hour like a dream she couldn't wake from. The DNA test had been done, Sophie had gone through with it, and Nathan had, too, under Emily's silent, unwavering gaze. Now, all that remained was to wait. And that waiting, quiet, helpless, heavy, was almost worse than the betrayal itself. She spent long hours curled up on the nursery rocking chair, her hands cradling her belly, gently rubbing slow circles. The room was nearly finished, the crib assembled, the tiny clothes folded and sorted, little animal decals stuck to the walls. It had once been a place of joy. Now it felt like a museum of a life she wasn't sure she still had. In those long moments, she found her mind drifting backward, to the beginning of everything. Nathan had been the charming stranger at her friend's engagement party. They'd laughed over lukewarm wine and dry cake, bonding over a shared love for old books and late-night diners. He wasn't flashy or overly confident, just kind, attentive, curious. He had walked her home that night under a streetlight's soft glow, and kissed her like she was the only person in the world who mattered. Their love had grown fast, but deep. 2 years later, he proposed under a canopy of string lights on their apartment rooftop, shaking hands clutching a ring he had saved months to buy. She said yes through tears, and they danced barefoot on the concrete floor until midnight. The first year of marriage hadn't been easy. Nathan had lost a job, Emily had taken on extra hours just to keep them afloat. They'd fought, they'd cried, they'd doubted. But they'd held on. Every struggle had been met with promises whispered under blankets and hopeful glances across kitchen tables. That's what made this so hard. They had been through storms before, how had this one broken them? Nathan tried, in his own quiet way, to close the growing distance. He hovered near her in the evenings, brought her dinner, offered back rubs she didn't ask for. But his presence felt like an echo now. And every time he said, "Don't believe her, Emily. Please." It felt like he was asking for trust she no longer had the strength to give. She wanted to believe the man who had held her during her first panic attack. The man who painted the nursery wall without complaint when she changed her mind 3 times. But now, all of that was blurred by Sophie's laugh in his office, by the scent of unfamiliar perfume on his shirt, by the ultrasound photos of another child that might be his. The baby kicked, pressing against her ribs. She smiled faintly, hand resting where she felt the movement. This child, at least, was hers. Her certainty. Her future. Whatever the DNA test revealed, one thing was clear, something had cracked. And no matter how the pieces fell, nothing would ever fit quite the same again. The email arrived on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The subject line was simple: paternity test results, confidential. Emily stared at it for several minutes, her fingers hovering over the trackpad, heart pounding against her ribcage like a trapped bird. Outside, the sky was gray and heavy, the kind of weather that matched how she felt inside. She glanced at the nursery across the hall, then back at the screen. Click. The words blurred at first, swimming in her vision. She blinked hard, then read the line again, slowly, each syllable cutting deeper than the last. Probability of paternity, 99.98%. Nathan was the father of Sophie's unborn child. She sat back in the chair, numb. No scream came. No sob burst out. Instead, Her breath caught in her throat, and the room around her seemed to blur and tilt. For a moment, she couldn't move. Her hands slowly drifted to her belly, feeling the quiet flutter of her own child within her. She had prepared herself for this, told herself that whatever the result was, she would face it, but no preparation could soften the blow of finality. This wasn't a possibility anymore. It was truth. Nathan found her still in the chair 10 minutes later. He had heard the mail notification chime and knew exactly what it was. He lingered in the doorway, his face pale, his eyes searching hers for any trace of softness. "Emily," he said quietly. "I'm so sorry." She didn't look at him. He walked in slowly, as though approaching a wild animal. "I didn't know she was pregnant until after. I swear." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "So it was true." He nodded. "It happened once. Just once. We were fighting. You were upset with me all the time. I felt distant, alone. It was stupid. I regretted it immediately." "One time?" she asked, still not looking at him. "And that one time gave you another child. I never meant to hurt you." Emily finally turned to face him, and when she did, the pain in her eyes was worse than any shouting could have been. Her lips trembled. "You didn't just hurt me, Nathan. You destroyed everything I thought we were." "I love you," he said, voice cracking. "I love our baby. I love this family." Tears spilled down her cheeks. Then why wasn't that enough? He had no answer. The silence that followed was thick and final. Emily stood slowly, wiping her face with trembling hands. She moved past him to the bedroom, opened his closet, and began pulling clothes from hangers. She didn't speak, didn't yell, just folded his things with quiet, mechanical precision and dropped them into an empty suitcase. Nathan watched her, helpless. "Emily, please. Don't do this. Don't throw us away." She paused only once, holding one of his old t-shirts in her hands, the one he used to wear when they'd curl up on the couch together watching movies. Her fingers clutched the fabric like a memory trying to stay alive. Then she placed it gently in the suitcase and zipped it shut. "I'm not throwing us away," she whispered. "You did." His shoulders sagged, his voice desperate. "I still love you." "I know," she said. "And that's the hardest part." Because she still loved him too. Even after everything. Even after the lies, the betrayal, the image of Sophie's hand on his arm. That love didn't vanish, it sat inside her like a cruel ache. But love, she now understood, wasn't enough. Not when trust was gone. Not when another child existed because of a betrayal she hadn't seen coming. "I need peace, Nathan," she said, eyes glistening. "For me. For this baby. I can't raise her in a home built on lies." He didn't argue. He knew, somehow, that he'd already lost the right to fight for forgiveness. She handed him the suitcase, her hands trembling. "Please go." Nathan looked at her one last time, then at her belly. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came. So he nodded, turned, and left. The door clicked shut behind him. Emily stood in the hallway, breathing shallowly, her heart breaking all over again, not because he was gone, but because a part of her still wanted him to stay. It was late evening when Emily's phone buzzed again, this time with another message from Sophie. She hadn't heard from her since the DNA results had come in, and a part of her had hoped it would stay that way. But something about the timing, the quiet after Nathan's departure, the stillness in the house, made her curious enough to open it. "Emily, I'm truly sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I didn't know he was married." Emily stared at the message, her lips pressed in a thin line. It was hard to believe, how could Sophie not know? But as she read on, the anger began to dull, giving way to something else. "He told me he was in the middle of a separation. That things with you were over. I swear I wouldn't have gone near him if I knew the truth. I feel sick about it." Attached was a voice note. Against her better judgment, Emily tapped play. Sophie's voice trembled. He made me believe he was hurting, that you didn't love him anymore. I was naive. I thought I could be someone special to him. But he lied to me, just like he lied to you. I didn't know you were pregnant until that day you came to the office, and after that, I couldn't stop thinking about you. I can't take it back, but I want you to know I never meant to ruin your life. I'm going to raise this baby alone. He's not part of my future. I just needed you to hear this. Emily sat in silence long after the message ended. Her heart was still raw, the pain still fresh, but now she saw things more clearly. Sophie hadn't set out to destroy her. She had been used, misled, just like Emily had. Their lives had been turned upside down by the same man, their trust broken by the same lies. She would never forget what Sophie represented, but in that moment, she stopped seeing her as the enemy. They were both women who had been hurt. One carried a child conceived in betrayal. The other, a child born from love but shadowed by heartbreak. And for the first time, Emily didn't feel alone in her pain. The days that followed were filled with a strange stillness. The kind that comes after a storm, where everything looks intact, but underneath, the ground is soft and shaken. Emily moved through it slowly, deliberately, choosing each step with care. She knew she couldn't let grief swallow her, not when a tiny heartbeat still echoed inside her. She started with the small things. Morning walks with her mother. Phone calls with Jenna, who brought laughter when it felt impossible. They helped her breathe again. Emily began attending therapy once a week, unsure at first, but soon finding that the quiet space allowed her to say the things she couldn't say to anyone else. I still love him, she admitted during one session, voice trembling. But I don't trust him. And I'm afraid of being a single mom, of raising this baby alone. Her therapist didn't rush to fix her pain. She simply listened, and for the first time, Emily felt heard. At home, she picked up an old journal and started writing again, not about Nathan, not about betrayal, but letters to her unborn daughter. Page after page, she poured out her thoughts, hopes, fears, and promises. She wrote about the first time she heard the heartbeat, about the nursery she'd decorate, about the life she wanted to build, just the two of them. I don't know what our world will look like, she wrote one night, but I promise I'll make it safe and full of love. Emily began making plans, not revenge or what-ifs, but real, grounded decisions. With the help of her lawyer, she filed for a legal separation. She wanted things clean and structured before the baby arrived. Custody discussions were formal and difficult, but she didn't let emotion dictate them. It wasn't about punishing Nathan, it was about protecting her child. Nathan, meanwhile, didn't disappear. He called. He showed up with gifts. He emailed long letters full of apologies and promises. He swore he'd do anything to fix it. I was stupid, he said during one visit. But I'll make it right. We can go to therapy. We can rebuild. But Emily had already made her choice. I don't hate you, Nathan, she said, her voice calm but firm. I just know I deserve more. And so does she. The old Emily, the one who would have clung to a broken version of love just to keep the picture intact, was gone. In her place stood a woman who had been torn down but rebuilt herself with fierce grace. A mother, strong and clear-eyed, who knew her worth. With each passing day, the weight of betrayal grew lighter. Not gone, but manageable. She kept journaling, kept breathing, kept loving the little life growing inside her. She didn't need Nathan's protection anymore. She had become her own strength. The morning Grace was born, the world seemed to pause. Emily lay in the hospital bed, exhausted but overwhelmed with love as she cradled her newborn daughter in her arms. Grace's tiny fingers curled instinctively around hers, her skin soft and pink, her breathing gentle. In that moment, all the noise of the past few months, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the fear, faded into silence. Only love remained. Tears welled in Emily's eyes, not from pain, but from something deeper. She kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, "You deserve a life of truth, little one. And I promise you'll have it." Grace was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a spirit Emily could already feel. Calm, but strong. As the nurses came and went, checking vitals and making notes, Emily barely noticed. Her focus was completely on the little life in her arms. This child, born from chaos, had become her clarity. News of Grace's birth spread quickly. Jenna was the first to arrive, carrying flowers and a stuffed elephant nearly as big as the baby. "She's beautiful," Jenna whispered, gazing at Grace. "And so are you, Em. You did it." Emily smiled, and for the first time in a long while, it wasn't forced. Later that day, Nathan showed up. He stood awkwardly at the door, holding a small bouquet of roses and a hesitant smile. Emily didn't invite him in right away. She looked at Grace, sleeping peacefully, then back at the man who had broken so much. "She's healthy?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Emily replied, her voice even. "She's perfect." He stepped closer. "May I?" Emily nodded, allowing him to sit nearby. Nathan stared at Grace for a long time, visibly moved. "She looks like you," he murmured. She's everything." Emily let the silence linger before she spoke again. "You can be a father to her. That's your right. But we're not a family, not like we were. I won't go back." Nathan looked at her, eyes filled with regret. "Emily, I know I ruined things. But I still." She raised a hand gently. "This isn't about love anymore, Nathan. It's about truth. It's about her. You lied to me. You broke something that can't be repaired." He nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling in. "I'll do whatever you need," he said quietly. Emily met his eyes. "What I need is peace. And for Grace to grow up in a world where women know they can stand, even after being broken." Nathan left soon after. There were no dramatics, no pleas. Just a quiet understanding that his chapter in her life had changed. Emily spent the rest of the evening staring at Grace, her heart full in a way it had never been before. This wasn't the life she had imagined. But it was hers now, raw, real, and rewritten on her terms. She thought about everything she had lost, but also everything she had gained: clarity, strength, self-respect, and above all, her daughter. As the sun dipped below the horizon and soft light filled the room, Emily whispered one more promise to Grace. "You'll know what real love looks like, because I'll show you. And you'll grow up never needing to question your worth." With Grace nestled against her chest, Emily closed her eyes. Her old life had ended. But her story was just beginning.